Recently, True Game Data released a video showing off a class that used slugs on the Jak-12. If you don't know who he is, which I highly doubt, he is a stat guru for Warzone who also happens to be a monster of a player. If you aren't subscribed to him, I highly encourage you to go check him out now because he makes some really good content and he even has his own application online called True Game Data. So go show him some love. And in this video, he made the Jak-12 look so good and so easy to use. Not long after, I began getting comments about it, especially regarding my ranking video where I put slugs on the Jak-12 as one of the worst. Well, somehow in that video, looking at my notes, I ended up getting the damage profile for frag rounds and Dragon's Breath and slugs all mixed together because frag rounds and Dragon's Breath generally take like 3 shots to kill even up close, but slugs, they can actually 2-tap at some places, which does make a really big difference. So I just want to say, I was wrong. They definitely don't deserve to be bottom tier, and for that, I feel like I need to say that I'm sorry, not because of the ranking necessarily, but because I fed wrong information with an oversight in my notes. Now, I did cover the Jak-12 in its entirety in the past, including slugs, and you can find all the stats and the time to kill and all that kind of stuff, how many shots it takes with slugs in that video, and yes, those are accurate. I just made the mistake of mixing those numbers up in my ranking video that was recent. But to make up for this, today, it's all about the Jak-12 with slugs, and you know what? Seeing how good True Game Data made these things look made me realize that there are some absolutely really good players out there who can make these quirkier gun setups work, and the potential is absolutely there, so I want to go ahead and look at the rest of the slug shotguns and give them their own videos because they do have some good potential. So if you're happy slugs are getting some more love, go show True Game Data that same love because really it's because of him I'm deciding to make this video because man, he just made it look so fun. And honestly, I remember having a harder time using it, so I want to put more time into slugs as a whole, practice more with them, and see what kind of possibilities there are with these things. And I gotta tell you, looking at my notes, a lot of the shotguns on paper actually have some really good time to kills and damage ranges. I've covered most of the slug shotguns already in Warzone, but they were mixed in with other ammo types for their respective videos, so if you search like Model 680 Warzone Guide, you can get an idea of what they're like. Now, how does the Jak-12 stack up in the meta now though? Are slugs actually top tier? Well, let's get into it. First off, the damage. Now in Warzone, slugs all function like other guns where they have body multipliers for where you hit. You get head, chest, stomach, arms, and legs that all deal different damages. The max damage range for the base Jak-12 with slugs is about 2.6 meters. Headshots will deal roughly 235-ish points of damage here, and you will never get a one-shot kill with them, which is something I believe all the other slug shotguns can do in their max range, even the Origin 12. Now, in this range, you can get a 2-shot kill stomach and up. Once you hit past that, which is pretty much every engagement ever since it's only 2.6 meters, stomach shots will not kill in 2 shots, but chest and head still will. And this extends up to about 17.9 meters, where you can 2-shot fully armored players with chest shots and headshots. This is where the power of slugs come into play. That's 2 shots, and at 300 RPM, that's a time to kill of around 200 milliseconds. Now granted, there is a small open bolt delay that's pretty small, so you'd maybe add about like 30 milliseconds to that, but honestly, that's still pretty insane, especially at this range. Now if you stack on some attachments like the biggest barrel, the torrent barrel, with the Marauder suppressor, you can take that range up to about 25 meters. So that's actually really strong. Now while all this sounds fun and dandy, there are a lot of things that make this kind of difficult to always pull off consistently. For one, arms and legs both deal absolutely atrocious damage. If you hit legs even up close, like point blank, you're looking at about 47 points of damage. It's ridiculously weak. Now arms are a bit better with like 90 damage up close or so, but again, they drop off so quick and it's going to be a lot more shots to kill. The key is hitting stomach and chest area because up to 17 meters, you get that chest shot time to kill that's really quick, 200 milliseconds, but stomach is going to take 3 shots, so it goes up to 400 milliseconds, but that's really still good. Now slugs again do have some quirkiness to them and they sound great on paper, but they are a little bit harder to pull off consistently. With the Jak-12 in particular, there is also a bit of recoil. For some players it's more manageable than others. For me, I found it a little bit more difficult unless I had a barrel equipped. Now the barrels that give you more range all help with recoil a decent amount, so with this it makes it a little bit more manageable to stay on target. The torrent barrel and the influx barrel both help pretty similarly, although the torrent gives you slightly more range, but it also does hinder your aim down sights time and your mobility overall, so just be careful with that. Optics are also pretty useful, but I always find myself wanting to use another attachment instead. But either way, they're always a good choice in most cases, unless you are just dead set on using something else. You can kind of take it or leave it with these. They help, but I often don't want to sacrifice a grip or something like that. Now, one of the big things about this gun, and slugs in general, is we have to deal with some pretty bad muzzle velocity. In other words, the time it takes for your slug to actually hit the target. Now, it probably doesn't seem like much when you're watching clips up close, but when you use it and you start veering off a bit too far, it becomes instantly noticeable. Even at closer ranges, you may feel like you're on target, but the enemy is moving side to side, and you just can't seem to get the hit. That's probably because of the travel time. Now up close, it's less noticeable, so this is a big reason I don't recommend quote-unquote sniping with these things, aside from how bad the damage is at those long ranges anyway. Now, out of all the attachments to help with this, by far the most useful I found was the Marauder Suppressor, surprisingly. Now, here in this clip, you can see it actually made a good bit of difference at around 100 meters. Now, 100 meters, you don't want to be using this thing at that range, but it was good to test it to make it more obvious. So if you want to avoid the weirdness of slug travel time as much as possible, the Marauder is always a great attachment to help mitigate this as much as possible. Sadly, it is still present, but at these ranges you should be using these things. It isn't as much of an issue. It's just more noticeable against people who are really moving around and jumping around and stuff, and it definitely incentivizes you to play more up close with this thing. Now, the Marauder does also give you a boost to damage ranges as well, and that's about 23%, which compared to the other options is the best. And that's how it usually is. All shotguns that have the Marauder, you can usually get the best boosts from it, but be warned because it does slow down your movement speed even though it doesn't explicitly tell you it does. It also does hurt aim down sight speed by a good bit, so if you use this attachment, which I do recommend in most cases, then you will be a bit slower. Now, slugs are also kind of weird because they can be pretty inaccurate at times. They're coded in such a way that they almost have a small bit of spread to them, which I know most guns do, but it tends to deviate further from where you aim for slugs, and if you use barrels or chokes and suppressors, usually it helps them be a bit more accurate. It even states this in the stats for some of the slug shotguns, but cutting the barrel down will make it worse. The choke is the best attachment generally for that. This is one of the other issues slugs can have at times, which again makes it harder to use well, especially for more novice or beginner players. You can tell even at those closer ranges you use it. It just gets more pronounced at further ranges, especially with the bullet velocity. Now, when it comes to how to use this thing, or slugs in general for that matter, I think that the developers intended these things to be just to kind of extend your shotgun's range by a little bit and make it a little bit harder to use, and they're really not meant for sniping. So normally shotguns are good up to like 10 meters. Slugs can make this more up to about 20 meters. Now with the Jak-12, you have to treat this almost like an up-close LMG, where you need to challenge really only out to 20 meters or so, in my opinion. Past that, it just gets really hard to use consistently and well, and you only get 8 shots. Now, in the description of the slugs, it does say they're zeroed in at 30 meters, so you could go to 30, but because of the 2 shots, I recommend staying more in the 20 meter range. And I have to mention that 8 shots for most people is good for one-on-one engagements, and that's about it. Theoretically, you could kill 2 or 3 people with 8 shots, but it's just harder than it sounds with all the factors that slugs have to deal with. And currently, sleight of hand is broken, so you can't really reload any quicker, but once it's fixed, it will be an absolute lifesaver of an attachment to use with slugs. If you are a good player, if you account for the velocity and the range, you can make these things work well in shotgun range, and you can shred people. But if you're like me, who somehow manages to hit their hands all the time instead of their chest, it's going to be a little bit harder and you might die more than you think. But guys, the potential is there. This thing can be really good as long as you're really good. And of course, that's kind of an obvious thing to say, but with slugs, they are not the easiest things to use compared to traditional shotguns or SMGs, or any other gun really. They definitely have a good bit of risk to them, but the reward can be really good. In terms of a good class, there's a few ways to go. Now for me personally, I wanted to have a little less recoil, so I use the Torrent barrel, the Marauder Suppressor, 5mm laser, slugs of course, and the stippled grip. There are lots of ways to kit it out though. Now if it's too slow, use the Influx barrel instead because it's pretty similar to the Torrent barrel in a lot of ways, but you don't get that movement speed slowdown. Also, the 5 mW laser works for me because I absolutely hate slow sprint out times, and this could be swapped for the tac laser if you want to be a bit better at aiming down sights. Then stippled grip, you could also try the Merc 4 grip, which does help aim down sights time a little bit and recoil as well, but not by that much. But it does hurt your movement speed again, which with the Marauder suppressor and the big barrel, it's going to be really slow. But the biggest thing about this setup is you want to be engaging around 20 meters or less. Now when sleight of hand works, like I said, just swap that out for the grip instead. Because of slugs and how they can spread a bit more than usual at times, and because of the 8 rounds and the recoil and just having to deal with that slower muzzle velocity, it makes this thing hard to get down to a T. But the potential is there, and I feel that I have to say it's good, but these things are kind of holding it back from being super duper top tier viable or meta. That being said though, I think that these things are secretly kind of amazing. I mean, they're so secret that even I kind of overlooked them when I first examined them. Most people are probably going to struggle with the setup at first, or try shooting from too far, or just end up hitting limbs which really hurt damage. But try it out, practice with it a little bit, play a little bit more conservatively, and give it a shot. You might be surprised how quick you can absolutely destroy people at times. Do I think these could be meta? Well, as a primary weapon, probably not, especially against the Gallo. Again, it's just because of all the cons that these things have, but as a backup for more close range engagements, it can be a super viable weapon, especially a backup. It's got the power and range, but it isn't the most easy and simple thing to use in the world. But that being said, you guys have to try this setup at least once or twice and give it a shot. And that is just about it for this video. If you guys are happy I'm covering slugs again, let me know in the comments below. And like I said, go show True Game Data some love. He's a great dude. He makes great content, so go check him out. And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next Slug Shotgun video.